Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. It is episode 71. My name is Ilan.
72, mate.
72?
72 today.
I guess I'm still a little bit jet lagged then.
You're still 1 week behind. Yeah,
I
still
think
got
it's
the Vietnamness in you.
the Vietnamness in me for sure. It's a 3-hour jet lag, I reckon. But yeah, we are on episode 72. We're joined by my lovely friend and co-host, Jeremy. How are we?
I'm great, mate. I'm so excited to be back. Obviously, you were away for 4 weeks. I greatly missed you, and so too, I'm sure our listeners did miss your presence as well. But we're back in full force and keen to jump behind the mic again and discuss what is a pretty poignant topic that, one of the many that we were talking about whilst you were away. You did a bit of thinking time, whilst you were on your gibbon experience up in the trees of Laos. A lot of thinking time, wasn't it? So tell us about that and tell us about, how some of your experiences were to kick us off with.
Well, I mean, I guess it does sound cliche, but traveling does offer you the opportunity to do a lot of thinking, to do a lot of learning about yourself and about what you want. And just in general, it's a good meditative experience. And I think when you're doing it with friends and you have some great discussions, some great chats, it's always an amazing experience. But yeah, I started off in Thailand, moved my way into Laos and then into Vietnam. Nothing too unique about it, just a bit of that kind of backpackers Southeast Asian sort of trip. But it was an insane trip, probably one of the best of my life, and very glad that I did it. But
was it very tranquil? Like very just, in terms of the vibe of it, was it rather than like hustle bustle on the go hiking, everyday type of thing? Was it very much just, to yourself, content, taking in scenery, time for thinking, all of that razzle dazzle?
I mean, when you're away for 4 weeks, you have the luxury of dipping into both. So there were definitely times where it was, full on hectic sightseeing, doing the tourist stuff. But there were also times where you could just kind of chill out with friends and just talk about things and, just switch off. And, we had a term, we called it going off the grid. And one city in specifically in Thailand, Pai, Thailand, anyone who's been there will know that it's a very easy place to switch off from reality. And as our good friend Gabe Zaffron coined it, because he was there with me, he said, Pi is a false utopia, meaning that it paints a false picture of what you think life could be like. Because it's so relaxed there, you don't have a care. Like, I wasn't on my phone. I doom scroll a lot home. I wasn't really doom scrolling there. I was just really connected with the people around me, going on lovely hikes and, doing things I wouldn't particularly do in Melbourne. So
epic.
It was great. But one of the topics that I got to talking with my friends, and I'm sure you and I have spoken about this before, is the idea of would you rather be comfortable or happy? And I think this is a really, really cool topic to discuss. But before we kind of unpack it, tell us why you reckon it's so poignant now.
Yeah, well, being in our 20s, being in our early 20s, late teens perhaps, you're going to experience rite of passages. You're going to experience maybe times as well where you've even gone beyond that rite of passage, and it might be a job, a career, a friendship, a relationship that you've been settling in for quite some time now, maybe a couple years. And, you're feeling comfortable, but are you necessarily feeling happy as well? In our mid-20s in particular, which is where we're at now, I feel like we start to be a lot more intentional with our actions when it comes to our career of choice, when it comes to the location we want to live in, when it comes to the person that we want to be dating and how we want to be dating. We want to be a lot more intentional. And look, this is hard because you might have to cancel some really deep connections that you might have had once, but they might not be serving you anymore, and that can cause some discomfort. But I think we'll unpack that. Discomfort is probably necessary if it will mean that you will be happy in the long term, because we know that comfort and complacency can just be that downward spiral. And that is why it's something that is, so prevalent to us now. We're 24, and for a lot of you guys listening around the same age as us as well, it's something at the forefront of our mind. Like, are we with the people that we want to be with because we truly feel happy around them? Or are we just comfortable? And same goes for our career choices.
It's true. And I mean, I think the reason this is such a pertinent discussion, especially in our mid-20s, is given the fact that in life, a lot of the situations you're in, they're never going to be black and white necessarily. It's never going to be necessarily amazing or terrible. So there's usually a very nuanced gray area where you have to make that decision of whether you're just comfortable. And it's, they call it that region beta paradox. And I guess the best way to explain it, and we have touched on it before on the podcast, is this idea that you're stuck in this kind of comfortable situation where you have no action potential or stimulus to get you out of it because things are good. You could be in that relationship or that job where, sure, you're secure, there's familiarity, but there's not that happiness that you would get from potentially leaving it, right? So in the region beta paradox, it's almost better for that situation to deteriorate such that you would actually pursue what you truly want to do. But it's comfortable. It's cushy. It's like, why would you want to leave it? It's like you're sacrificing what which is comfortable for, and sacrificing the potential of finding something what you truly want. And the thing with being comfortable is that, and the comfort zone more specifically, is that it's concerned with keeping you there. And there's a saying that goes, it's like you're either growing or you're dying. So anything inside the comfort zone, I would say, is slowly deteriorating. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, to an extent, because I feel like sometimes feeling good and comfortable is good enough. So it's about knowing when to take a leap of faith and know when to get out of that it might not be serving you anymore. Because, you mentioned there with like the relationship example, you might be in a relationship that you said is good, but it's not making you happy to the extent that you might feel if you were to leave and experience something else. But I think that can also serve a little bit dangerously at times, because sometimes good is good enough. So I think it's about distinguishing, well, is it good, but is it actually growing me? Is it fulfilling me? Is it making me a better person? Or are my partner and I just going with the ebb and flow and staying in that region beta, that familiar zone where none of us are growing? And like you said, you're just a bit cushy, and that cushiness can potentially lead to a downward spiral where, like you said, if you're not growing, you're dying. So I think it's about being really reflective together and knowing, okay, is this just cushy? Is this just comfortable to the extent where we're not growing? Because if not, let's try spark this up and make some changes together.
Yeah, I like that approach. It's the collaborative approach rather than just dumping them to the side and hopping on your next dating app to say who's there. Because I'm a massive believer that you should work through any relationship to the best of your abilities. I guess my point is more so is gut instinct is a really strong thing. And if you're in a relationship with someone where they tick, some of the boxes, but not all of them, and fundamentally that there's probably someone better out there, but you just don't want to take that risk and find them. And yeah, look, when people talk about you two getting married, you're like, meh, you're not that excited because deep down they're not the suitable person for you. I would say that's hard to change for a person. It's like Mark Manson, I was going to talk about it later, but I think it's just such a brilliant concept, which is the idea that in life, for example, before doing any big decision, the answer you should give is like, would you want to do it? It should always be not a yes or no, but it should be a fuck yes. Meaning that every part of you wants to feel inspired and incentivized to pursue what you want to do or given that offer. So if you take the marriage example, if you're moving in with someone, should that be a fuck yes for you? It should, for sure. Because the thing is, anything less than that, and is there a voice in the back of your head that's telling you that they're not the right person for you? And let's switch it up. Let's look at a career context. Obviously, a lot of people aren't going to find a job that's on their purpose from the get-go, right? It's very hard. You come out of uni, you want to find that first grad job, especially if you're in the corporate world, and that's fine and all. But, after, I guess, a bit of work experience, it's very easy to get stuck in like that corporate ladder and whatnot. But some people have bigger dreams than that. Some people want to, forge something of their own. And for them, that idea is a fuck yes to them, right? That it's exciting for them. But if you ask them, well, do you want to like just stay in the same path? They might be like, yeah, no, there's no excitement, right? It's comfortable. And that's what I want to bring it down to, is like the best way you can probably get out and identify whether you're comfortable or you're happy is asking yourself that question. And it's the FES question.
And I think that question can really come about when faced with a potential obstacle, challenge, or experience that is going to elevate you. And the example you gave there of, for example, you're with a partner and you're looking at that next stage together. You're looking at that next step where you're potentially thinking of moving out together, right? That's, let's call that the obstacle slash challenge slash new experience, which is standing in your way. So if it's not going to be a fuck yes to that answer, then that voice of hesitation might be enough to tell you that, okay, maybe I need to change something here. And that's not to say that you should just, go and end with your partner. But I think it's a really important voice that you might need to hear. It's that instinct in you, that gut instinct in you telling you that I'm not wholeheartedly in this. And if I was to just go into something of a big step that I know I'm not wholeheartedly in, not only am I going to be feeling uncomfortable myself and not willing to give my whole self to this other person because it's an experience that you're going to be sharing with this other person, but it's also selfish to the other person. So not only are you letting yourself down by not fulfilling your own deep-rooted gut instinct and desire, but you're just going with the flow by saying yes. And in a sense, people pleasing this other person, even if they are your long-term partner, you're still people pleasing them, and it's taking a selfish turn to it because they think you're committing to it because you're ready to take that next step. But if you're not, you're leaving them with a false sense of hope.
And you see a lot of relationships end, after marriage, after having kids, because no one was ballsy enough to make the decision to leave when they had a feeling that partner wasn't right for them. And I reckon that's a massive reason, the divorce rate is, as high as 50%. It's because most people, they get into a relationship, it fulfills maybe 7 out of 10. It's great. But the fear for them is it's good enough, right? It's good enough. Am I really going to risk leaving this 7 out of 10 relationship to try and, try my luck and find someone that is a 10 out of 10? Because for most people, that's a really scary thought, right? It's like you've been in such a comfortable situation. You know what you're going to get with this person. You don't have to go back into the dating world. You don't have to go find someone else and put your heart out on the line again, because it's hard to be vulnerable. It takes a lot of strength. But at the same time, and this is what I wanted to talk to you about next, is that things are going to end up deteriorating when you're constantly in the comfort zone. So what I mean by that is the reason that divorce rate is so high is because both partners inevitably grow resentment towards each other because you're not totally in it. You're in it because you were probably settling for the most part. It's the same thing in the career context as well. If you're settling for what you're doing job-wise, you're never going to put your 100% into it. And the reason is because you're not truly in love with it, right? And yeah, you could put effort into it and do the bare minimum to get by. But at the end of the day, you start resenting yourself because you were too much of a coward to make the decision that you knew was best for you at the time. And it's the top 5 regrets of the dying, and I always talk about it, and I still will talk about it on this podcast, is not having lived a life true to yourself.
Yeah, and I think that point you make there about, feeling like a coward, I think that's attached to a lot of shame with this topic. I think we feel shame and shameful when we feel like we're letting someone else down. So, it's that feeling of, well, if I say no to taking that next step, whether it be in that relationship, whether it be for your job, whether it be moving to a different city, going against the grain is hard. Doing something that might not be really good for you deep down is hard. It's scary. It can be overwhelming at times. And I think the easy route is to just say yes and go with that same ebb and flow which you've been going with, because you're scared of that feeling of shame attached to it more so. But I think we need to recognize that there's more shame attached to just going with that ebb and flow as opposed to making that decision that deep down is maybe right for you, even if it means upsetting a few people along the way.
And I think it's so hard to in a way recognize that there's going to be more costs associated with you staying in that comfortable position. And when I say comfort, I don't necessarily mean that it's bad to be comfortable. Like, you can be happy and comfortable, and I guess we can talk about that soon. But what I'm talking about here is you're not truly happy. You're comfortable, and it's the same comfort you derive from doom scrolling, right?
Well, how do you know if you're truly happy then? Because we're trying to differentiate between comfortable and happy. How do you know if you're truly both?
I apply the fuck yes question. Seriously, I love doom scrolling, right? I love doing things that make me feel comfortable. But if you ask me, do you want to doom scroll for the rest of your life? It's not even a yes, it's a no, right? But it's comfortable. So there's a bit of that one-to-one relationship. And I suppose you could ask for it in the relationship context as well. If you ask me, for example, in the current relationship I am, are you happy? Is it a fuck yes for you? It 100% is. I wouldn't be in the 3-year relationship that I'm in if it wasn't. If it was anything less than a fuck yes, I'd be gone by now, because first of all, I know it's unfair to me and it's unfair to the other person. Yeah. And if it's a fuck yes, then there's something exciting about it, right? There's something that propels you to want to be there. There's something that, there's a reason you keep coming back to it that is more important than it just being comfortable, right? And the thing is, it's probably because something's growing. So really good question there, because some people might be like, I'm really comfortable, but am I truly happy? And I guess a good litmus test is using that FES question, but it's also asking yourself, do I feel like I'm growing within this relationship? Am I growing within this job? Right? Or am I growing within this situation? And I think if you can answer some of those questions, you might start identifying whether you're truly comfortable or happy. But I got to be honest with you, most time it's a gut feel as well. You can ask and apply any litmus test you want. Most times people and humans, we're very good at identifying whether we're comfortable or we're happy or we're both. And ideally you want to be both. You want to be happy regardless. But happiness is also a state of being, right? It's not like pleasure. Something bad can happen to you, right? Like, you could be in a lot of pain. Maybe you break your leg, right? And that's an uncomfortable experience. You might need surgery. You might be in a world of pain, but everything else in your life, you're just generally, your state of being, you're a happy person. And that's something that you should also kind of keep in mind as well when thinking about this topic.
I love that, because I think, I was, thinking about that. Well, what is happiness? And I think, like you just said, happiness is just that state of being that you can be in a state without worry and without concern. It's a state of being that is free of worry and concern. You can be unequivocally yourself, and I think anything beneath that, you might not be at that level of happiness, whether it is with your job, your relationship, your friendships, whatever. And I think that can only spiral like a snowball effect. You go deeper down the pathway of what that is, and that's only going to continue to grow. Things are going to only arise again and again and again that will take away from that happiness. If there is that worry of future, perhaps, that person you're comfortable with them right now. You've been together for, let's say, 4 or 5 years or so. You started dating when you were in your late teens, and now you find yourself 23, 24, and those next questions are going to be asked about your relationship. But you're still comfortable right now. You're still feeling happy with that person right now. But deep down, if you know that going into those future years, and you're thinking about marriage and kids and upbringing and all of those big darker questions, if you know that there are hesitations for that, then this is where the tough decisions might need to be made. And you shouldn't feel shameful for it. Like we said, if anything, you should be like, you would be highly respected for that, because it's freaking hard to make a decision like that for yourself and for someone that you've known so deeply for so long. But God, you'll come out of it feeling so much more respectful of yourself as well, because that, I think, again, we speak about divorces, that's what leads to that, when it's that feeling of comfort and just going with the flow because it has been good so far, but deep down, that future you might think otherwise. And yeah, we're all about reflective practice. And I think that's where you need to continue to ask yourself about your values, about your aspirations for the future, and about whether you and this person are continuing to grow and flourish one another, so that you can avoid that nastiness down the line, because it would only get worse.
And I would honestly examine those hesitations as well, because your hesitations might have nothing to do with the other person. It might have everything to do with yourself, right?
It might exactly. It might not be the other person. It might be you.
Correct. Like you might be with the perfect person and
Yeah.
you do want to marry them, and it is a fuck yes, but the hesitation to potentially want to move in or potentially take that next step is incumbent on maybe financial decisions,
Yeah.
you know, trying to pay rent or wanting to travel together. So it's again, we're humans. We're going to try and box things into things like if you've got a doubt, that means they're not the right one for you. I think that's a very simplistic way of looking at it.
We want to be rational about this.
Yeah, look, I mean, look, if you've got doubts about the person, then chances are they're not right for you. But with that being said, examine those hesitations and, you know, think it out, write it down, right? Because the truth of the matter is time does reveal all. And this is what I wanted to talk about next, which is a lot of people, when they're comfortable and they want to emerge out of the comfortable situation to try and become happy, there's two things that tend to happen. The first thing is, as we said, if you're not growing, you're dying, and in comfort, things tend to die, is that your situation, and let's say it's that relationship or the bad job, it'll tend to deteriorate. You might start hating yourself more for it. You'll resent yourself. You'll resent the other person. And then the relationship or the job or whatever it is, it'll start becoming so bad that you will be more happy to leave that situation than continue in it. So it's the whole idea, as we said with the region beta paradox, that you want things to get so bad that you have enough motivation. So for you, you'd rather risk the uncertainty of potentially never finding someone again than being in the same situation, right? And I think that's sometimes a really good thing. That's the first case. Wait for things to get worse. The second part is people just, you know, take that leap of faith, and God rewards those who take a leap of faith.
Yeah, and I only commend those people, you know, if it is a breaking up with your career or breaking up in a relationship for the purpose of, you know, those long-term things. There's just something there that might not be clicking for you, and you've actually done the work and you've thought about this quite deeply. That is such a respectful thing, because so often we just glorify breakups that have where one party has maybe been a bit toxic, or both partners have been toxic and it just went to shit and it wasn't working. Like, those are the situations where it's so easy to walk away and feel happy about ending it, because you can just say, yeah, that person treated me badly, they were a prick, so F them, glad it's over. But those situations where you guys actually got on great and you were comfortable with one another, but you just knew that long term, maybe there was something there that wasn't going to allow you to continue with compatibility long term wise. That's such a more respectful situation, an admirable rather situation, because you're thinking more maturely about it. It's hard to make that decision. You're essentially still in love with them as well, so that, you know, even tenfold makes it even worse. But down the line, you thank yourself for it, and you will admire the way in which you upheld your values. Because if you don't, that's what I think leads you to being that coward which you spoke about. And no one wants to go to bed at night feeling that way, and because that will only get more deep rooted into you, and you'll start to feel like that becomes your identity. That person that is just cowardly and doesn't act according to what they truly want to act towards.
And I guess it'll catch up with you as well, right? It's like you might not be much of a coward in your early mid-20s, but the more behaviors that you do that resemble people pleasing and just settling for things because you're too scared to take the risk to go after what you actually want, you'll really start hating yourself, you know, in 10, 15 years time, because you've realized you've wasted, you know, the one life you have just for security, right? And the reality is you will still get security when you're happy. But the benefit is you'll actually be happy in the process, right? You'll still be growing, you'll still be fulfilled, and you will derive so much meaning for it. And I guess for anyone who's in their early 20s, and I guess we can use the relationship context, this isn't a sign to break up with anyone or anything like that, but it's just examine what you and that partner want out of life. Are they compatible? Have that hard conversation early.
Collaboration. It's not about, just you in it and or just your partner in it. It's that collaboration. Are you growing, or are you just stagnant together?
Talk to one another. See what you both want out of life. You know, maybe you do have your doubts, but after this discussion, you chat about things and all those kind of reservations you had in your head tend to evaporate because maybe you're more on the same page than you initially thought. And if that's the case, well, you'd just be happy that you weren't a coward and didn't shy away from the conversation, but instead thought about it positively, collaborated with them. And guess what? Even if they're not on the same page as you and you can't work it out, that's life, isn't it?
I think if, you were to really just sit down with yourself and ask yourself that question of, do you want to be comfortable or do you want to be happy? I think most people would choose happiness rather than comfort. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I would rather risk being unhappy if it meant going for something amazing and meaning that I'd be happier in the future rather than just being comfortable. As I said, I think about doom scrolling a lot.
It's a great example.
It's great because it's like, it's
short-term gratification. It's comfortable. It's like, rainy days. It was like this weekend in Melbourne has been shockingly rainy, and it's that desire to just stay in bed and doom scroll because it's comfortable, but it's not necessarily going to be good for you. But, getting yourself out of bed, getting dressed, making your bed sheets, doing the basics and going for a walk, even if it's like maybe not all that favorable, or just doing something in a different environment, even though you don't want to in that moment, that you'll feel better for it long term. It's that, what we've mentioned before, it's that long-term gratification for potentially short-term hardship, because it's hard to get out of bed on certain days when you don't feel like you want to, and it's testing. So it's that long-term gain for short-term sacrifice.
And here's a solution for anyone, and this is something I just thought about now. Similar to the episode where we talked about getting out of a rut, I would write down everything that you feel is comfortable for you and everything you feel is uncomfortable for you. And every day, try and pick one thing in that kind of category that's uncomfortable for you and try to get it done. And it could be so small, right? Something that might be really comfortable for me might be uncomfortable for you and vice versa. And that could be as simple as just going to the gym or not going on your phone for an hour. And
making something different to eat for breakfast.
Making something yeah, exactly. Maybe trying out a new recipe that you're not used to that could, fucking go to shit. You might have some burnt toast.
Taking a different route to work.
Exactly.
Just something different.
And you'll know what makes you uncomfortable because you'll have that hesitation. You'll have that doubt that tells you, are we sure we want to do this? Let's stick to the familiar. Nah, do that one thing, at least one thing, and see how... I reckon you'll be happier for it after the week. There's no evidence base necessarily suggesting this, but this is just some of my Ilan bro theory.
Well, you can make it a bit more evidence based if you take those examples like you said and assign a plus or a minus to it, which we've spoken about previously. And if you end up walking away with more pluses than you do minuses, then you'll know that those practices have made you feel more positive about yourself during that week.
I love that. Anything else we want to talk about, or
no, mate? I think
we covered it.
I think we've covered that. So, guys, thank you for listening, and we think this is such an important conversation to be had with friends as well, especially if you're listening and you're around those mid-20s, and these are things that are arising for you, whether it's about your relationships, your career, your friendships, whatever it may be, that is centered around the topic of feeling comfortable or feeling happy. Talk about it with your friends. And if you've got any further questions, slide into our DMs. As we say, they're always open. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have enjoyed, share it with a friend. Tell it to them because, we want to allow everyone to grow as much as we do. And, just by you listening to this episode, you're growing inevitably. So thank you again. Rate us as well if you enjoy. And we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.